Today's the first decan of Cancer season, or the first day of Cancer season, actually. And this is the time when I talk about eschatology, which is kind of the crown jewel of the whole system of Transcendental Kabbalah, and it also is an opportunity to talk about the 4 laws that structure the album 93696: sovereignty, hierarchy, emancipation, and individuation. So in the album's divided into 4 parts, and each of those is one of the laws that governs heaven. And so over the course of the next kind of 10 days or so, I'll talk about each law specifically, but to dovetail on the last video, I want to just talk a little bit about what I'm talking about. And in the context of like history. So I think the key thing to maybe say is that sovereignty, hierarchy, emancipation, and individuation are laws in the sense of ideals similar to the ideals that are governing secular humanism, which are freedom, equality, and brotherly love. And so the basic idea here is that like those ideals are, first of all, they are correlated to material conditions, right? Those ideals arose, during kind of the late 1700s and really kind of began to hold sway during the 1800s in Europe and in the United States, with the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and Napoleon's conquests, where he sort of spread them throughout Europe. And so there's the material conditions. That's one thing to talk about, like why those ideals were born. But then also, they're very vague. Vague isn't quite the right word. They're not clear concepts. So first of all, we don't think that much, like the French Revolution had, liberté, égalité, fraternité, and that third one, brotherly love, is not, you don't hear about that one as much in the, Anglosphere and just in modern times, even though the American Revolution, like that was an ideal for the Americans, like the city Philadelphia, that means brotherly love, and that was a very important city for the early United States. But these, like we take for granted in a way, these ideals have a certain authority, it's like, well, of course, freedom and equality, those are something that you would really, fight for, even die for. Anything that does not respect those ideals is bad. But they can be construed to mean sort of opposite things. So like both, capitalism and communism invoke freedom and equality, But then there's an argument about, what really constitutes freedom. Is freedom just, the freedom to sell your labor, or the freedom to kind of do what you're going to do unless it's impinging upon rights? Or does, does work need to be done to make sure that people have freedom from sort of, I guess, surreptitious, secret, underhanded forms of slavery? So is the freedom of capitalism real freedom or not, basically? And same with equality. So the just real basic point here is that we are, in an era where it seems that things are really, really changing, and it's not clear that the values of secular humanism are going to continue to hold sway. And sovereignty, hierarchy, emancipation, and individuation are values like that, but for like a future eon, which may be coming to pass already, or maybe it could possibly come to pass, but won't necessarily. I think maybe it's in part that these values will sort of help move the needle towards a more positive society to emerge from the society that we knew, rather than a worse situation. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to pursue. I've mentioned a couple of different things. I'd like to get back to the material conditions thing. Maybe I'll say just a little more about that before I stop this video. I mean, the key thing with the freedom and equality in its context is, in terms of material conditions, is that the power of Christianity was beginning to really wane, and the sort of shaming and judgment and humiliation and anti-intellectualism that was the sort of dark side of the church was really being challenged. And then Europe was beginning to conquer new territories because of improvements in navigation. And so the French and the British were battling over North America for a while, and the British finally won, but then the French helped the American colonies defeat the British, and then that kind of bankrupted the French, which then made the French Revolution happen because the monarchy wasn't powerful anymore, or it didn't have funding really to keep its citizens happy or to put them down. And so there was this new faith in the abilities of the individual and the merits of art and science, and industry, in the sense of just kind of working hard, but also eventually like industry. And one could make the case that those values emerged and held sway because that was what was useful to a certain, vibrational level of the capital world spirit, and that's something that is always worth keeping in mind, that moral, we think of them as almost God-given moral ideals, but there's this kind of contradiction because secular humanists don't typically believe in God, though some of them do. But there's a morality, but they have a moral sort of function in terms of people following them guiding people's activity, but in a way, perhaps what they're really, their function in a sort of larger context is to, by getting people to behave in a certain way, allow for the economy to become more connected and differentiated and powerful. So, the material conditions are really changing now. With, it seems like we're definitely going through a technological revolution, and so there's this opening for new values.